Hi, I'm Greg Ulan with Reynolds & Reynolds, and this is Connected. Today's a great day. I get to sit down in studio with the one and only Cliff Banks, founder of AUTOVATE and the Banks Report. Cliff, thanks so much for joining.
It's great to be here, Greg.
Yep,
I think
absolutely.
this is our third time doing the podcast.
Yeah, so the first two have been kind of offsite at NAD.
Yes,
though.
yeah, correct.
So this one, a little clearer head.
Yes,
right,
maybe not as tired, not as much noise or distractions going on.
Yeah, so thanks for coming in. Made the drive down from Detroit,
right.
and always appreciate it.
It's great to be here.
Yeah. So Cliff, one of the things you're one of the insiders, it seems like, that has information before everybody else, right? And I love that about you and your ability to analyze it and kind of have a take on it that oftentimes is a little bit different than others. So I don't know what's top of mind for you right now in the industry. As far as what's going to have an impact on the industry as a whole, but also dealers specifically.
Right. Wow. I mean, there's so many things. I wrote, I think 5 or 6 years ago that we were heading into probably the most uncertain period in our industry's history. And I think right now we are right at the forefront of that. And we could liken it to a hurricane, Greg, where we've had the weather reports. We know you've been watching this come. Right. And now we're starting to feel the first winds of that hurricane. And that really right now I think is probably the EV. The electric vehicle dynamic. And I don't know that we're going to have any clarity as to the impact of that quote-unquote transformation or transition, if you will, for another 3 to 4 years. I mean, we've got 30 vehicles, 30 EV launches coming this year. GM has a couple of key launches coming up second half of the year. But we get into 24, there's probably 50 or so, and then another 50 or so in 2025. The big question is, will the customers buy?
Right.
I mean, will they be interested? And there's mixed data out there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Tesla shows that there's interest, and it's Tesla right now and everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
But that's everyone brings up the infrastructure question, and I think it's not just infrastructure of charging, and that's what everyone thinks about, but it's also industry infrastructure to manage the impact of what does it do to vehicle residuals? How does it impact the auctions?
Yeah.
What does it do to dealership service departments? There's just so many things to look at, and like I said, we have mixed data.
Yeah.
Right now as to what the customers are looking for, and it's hard to cut through. It's hard to cut through that data right now because we have the Inflation Reduction Act. With the tax incentives. Right. What impact, if any, is that having on sales? I don't know that we can tell that now. I mean, there's some theories, but I think it's too soon. Inventory's piling up. Yeah. I think the latest numbers show 91, 92 days supply for EVs. People blame the dealers, like to blame the dealers for not being able to sell them, but I don't think it's the dealer's fault at all. I think it's just this maelstrom of uncertainty that we are still going to have over the next 3 to 4 or 5 years before we have any clarity on what it looks like coming out of that. So.
Yeah, and are there any comparables that you know of in history where – because dealers are going to figure this out. I mean, at the end of the day, right, it's a collective group of the most resilient entrepreneurs on the planet.
Right. And it's not just dealers. I mean, it's the banks, it's the financiers, it's a collaboration or, the whole combination of the industry. But, yeah, I think we can figure out. But to your point, I mean, dealers have to be the ones selling.
Right. So when you think about that and one of the things, too, you mentioned residuals, right? And I think that carries over certainly on the EVs because we just don't know.
Right.
But it also can have at least a big impact on ICE vehicles and residual values there, right? If demand is extremely high for ICE vehicles and low mileage used ICE vehicles,
yes.
Clearly residuals are going to go up on those vehicles if demand is there. So that'll be interesting. That'll be interesting to see what happens over time.
But on the flip side, if the demand is there for EVs, and if customers start buying EVs in mass, that could drive down the residual values of the ICE vehicles that are on the roads are being sold today significantly. So
that's true, and I think you might see also pockets in the country
Sure.
where you're going to see drastic differences in the value of a used vehicle.
Yeah.
Right?
The
So if
regional
you're-
and market differences are.
which it'll be really interesting to watch. And then, the more we can shrink, at least the United
Right.
States, right, when it comes to vehicle
Sure.
delivery, even from auction, right, where a dealer can source
Right.
from anywhere, have it delivered,
Right.
factor in the transportation fees and everything else, that can make a big difference. I mean, if there's a $5,000 gap between, a vehicle
Right.
on the West Coast in LA
Right.
and in, I don't know, Kansas City,
Right.
Why not ship it and
Yes.
and you more than cover your
Right.
cost?
Right.
So it'll be really interesting to see, for sure. What bets are you seeing be made, or maybe even looking back in history? Has there even been a time where we've had this much of a kind of shift where dealers have made bets and been right? And if not, what are you seeing, or maybe what are some opportunities that you see out there for dealers?
Look, I mean, I think the bet right now it probably is on two levels. One, do I sell or do I stay?
Okay.
Do I exit the business or do I stay? And my thinking is, if you're going to stay, you got to get big. If you're going to stay in the business, you have to make sure you have access to capital, and are willing to use that capital to buy stores, and buy a lot of stores. When I say, and that number, that word "a lot" could have a different definition based on your size, but certainly you need to get. I think getting to that 10 to 20 level is probably important.
Why?
Well, the investments in technology that dealers have to make, I think, are so huge. I think it's also important to build somewhat of a regional or local market powerhouse. And I'm not. Listen, there are going to be some dealers, single point dealers, that are incredible and will remain incredible and will remain forces within their communities for sure. But I think that number is dwindling significantly. You have to look at your, do you have that fire in your gut that you're going to want to ride this hurricane and this transformation or transition over the next few years and come out on the other side as a powerful, effective business? Or do you're looking at the money being paid to dealerships?
Yeah.
We just a huge sale recently with Hendrickson Toyota going to the Morgan Auto Group, and that was just rumored to be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, single point transaction in history.
Yeah.
We've had some other big ones. LA sold his Crown Toyota store to Swickard last year. That was another huge transaction. So when you start thinking about that kind of money, it's easy to see why dealers would exit. Whether they believe the business is going to be viable moving forward, or the retail industry is going to be viable. Look, we've talked about this in the past,
right?
But the dealer model is not going away. There's always talk about direct to consumer, but at the end of the day, the manufacturers always come back to the fact that the dealer is a necessary and integral piece of the model. And,
So let's talk about that for a second.
Okay.
When you think about the dealer, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I look at it as, if you're there, right? You're there because you add value.
Right.
At some level or another, you add
Right.
value to somebody else, right? So
Right.
for the dealer, they're adding value to the consumer, they're adding value to the manufacturer, and in addition, they're adding value in a lot of other places too. The lenders, insurance providers. There's a lot of people that are benefiting, and the dealer's benefiting as well. It's a two-way street. But as you look at the industry today and going forward, and maybe even looking backwards, right? Because we've seen this before, where the OEMs want more control, and
Right.
What are those core elements where the dealer is adding value and will continue to add value into the future for all parties?
Yeah. Well, all right. So I've had this conversation numerous times, and always invariably, we point to Tesla as well. But Tesla has survived without a retail model, and I'll admit, I think I've probably called that one wrong over time. I thought that not having a distribution network that outside of the Tesla, but that was independent, not having that would be a disadvantage for Tesla. It clearly hasn't been.
Sure.
But Tesla was built from the ground up, not a legacy player. And I don't think there's been great reporting. There's been some, but I don't know there's been some great reporting around the impact on the service side, not having dealers. I mean, and certainly it's been leaked a few times that dealers are providing service for Tesla vehicles now.
Sure.
So the advantages that dealers bring, I had this conversation in Phoenix recently. An Uber driver with an Audi e-tron.
Okay.
And he was just ripping the deal. He said, "I wish I could have bought this from Audi directly."
Huh.
And I asked him why, and we walked through the whole experience he had, and it was the dealer was marking the vehicle up significantly, and he just the buyer was having none of it. He wasn't interested, and that frustrated him. And so I pointed out, "But you ended up buying the vehicle." And he goes, "But I went to a different dealership." And I asked him, "Well, what was that like?" And he said, "Well, I got it for MSR. I got it for the list price, and it was a great experience." I said, "Well, okay, there's your marketplace at work. You had a business that you were doing, that you went to first, didn't like it, didn't like the experience or the price. You made a decision. You found one that provided you what you wanted. Now, you take that away, and if you're going to Audi directly, you have no choice.
That's right.
If you want that e-tron, you got to buy it from Audi, whether that experience is horrible or the price is terrible. You have no choice if you want that e-tron." So, the market's going to weed out the dealers that don't understand that.
Sure.
That can't provide that customer service. So I think that really inherently is just from a pure capitalist position. I think that's one advantage. Obviously, the service network,
Sure.
Component of that. And I mean, you could just go into a whole conversation about whether it's protectionism to not allow legacy manufacturers sell their vehicles, but I think it's actually protecting the choice and protecting the marketplace.
Yeah.
By putting some limits on what the manufacturers can do with their dealers.
No, that's a good perspective.
Yeah, right.
That's a good perspective. So as we look at dealers, and there's a lot of players that they're involved with, right? And they find a lot of ways. The one thing that I love about dealers as entrepreneurs is their ability to identify an area that they can provide value, right? They can help with. You look at something as basic as lining up financing.
Sure.
That's a very important part of their business, but it's also important for the consumer. It's important for the lender.
Right.
So they're effectively a broker there, right?
Right.
And
right.
And they do a great job with that. So there's a lot of value there. But what are some of the other areas that you see dealers dabbling in, or you think would be interesting for them to dabble in? Earlier today we were chatting, and you were talking about fleet. One of the things that forever intrigues me is this idea of the ownership experience, right? And I think about a car, right? And my vehicle today, right? I'm gonna decide to buy that vehicle again, or at least that make again, because of my everyday experience with it, right? I touch that thing twice a day, if not more.
Right.
I'm in it. It's a part of who I am, right? And that's the same for all of us.
Right.
So with that in mind, how can the dealer help with that ownership experience? That's something that I find really interesting, especially as we move into this more connected era.
Yeah. Well, I think, for a few years ago, we were watching, and dealers were starting to play around with subscription-based models. Yeah. That didn't pan out. They just couldn't make it pencil. It's still in play. I'm rearing its head again. I don't know that it's a true subscription play. But I think from a fleet and loaner perspective, if I, as a customer, and listen, I'll tell you, we own a Honda Odyssey, and there's a Bell tire around the 5 minutes from the house. Honda dealership, 10 minutes from the house. I would prefer to take it to the Honda dealership. Right. But there's this uncertainty factor where I just don't know what that experience is going to be like. If that dealership could promise me, and I could know for sure that if I drop my vehicle off, I can have that loaner, the loaner that I need for my family, I would take it there every time, whether the cost was more or not. Now, right now, I mean, the Bell tire isn't the big repairs, but it's all the, it's tires and brakes and oil changes and whatnot. But if the dealerships made it simpler for the customer to do business from a service perspective, but again, the reality is some of those service lanes are backed up.
Right.
They don't, they can't handle the business, that business. So it's not in their best interest to make it simpler right now, I guess.
Right.
I still got to go back to them to buy a car, right? Whether the service experience is terrible or not.
Yeah.
So but I would hope that as we get deeper into this decade, and we see companies like DealerWare, Holman, and others that provide fleet services, that and the technology behind the scenes is going to enhance that ownership experience at a much greater level on the service side.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important piece. Is it's not like anybody in a dealership, certainly the dealer, but anybody working in a dealership is trying to provide a poor experience, right? They want to provide a great experience. If you've ever worked retail, you always want to, right? But when you have 3 people standing at the counter in front of you and the phone's ringing and 2 on hold, it's not easy. So, how can we help? And I'm speaking on Reynolds here, but like how can we help make those things easier? Because everybody wants to provide a great experience. Nobody's sitting there going, you know what? I don't care.
I think the connected vehicle piece moving forward, and we've talked about this at length, and I've been writing about this for years. I mean, I think going back to 2016, 2017. But listen, and I would love for my car to tell me verbally, Cliff, we're going to need new front brakes here in 2 months. ABC Motors has a slot open on Wednesday night at 5:30 p.m. Which loaner vehicle would you like? Now, and think about this. I could, as a deal, I mean, think about some of the packaging, some of the F&I packages. If I purchased that platinum package, then you come and pick up my car for me and drop the loaner off, no questions asked. I don't even have to worry about setting an appointment. I mean, there's so many things I think that, and dealers are doing some of that today. But I'm talking incorporating the vehicle into the connected vehicle into that, so that it already knows my calendar. It's already, integrated or talk to the dealership service scheduler, parts department. If the part's not there, it's already made sure, ordered the parts from the supplier and made sure it's getting shipped, and it will be there in time for my appointment. I show up, concierge is staying there with the Diet Coke that they know that I like, and has the loaner vehicle ready and ready to go. There's no email, there's no text from a dealer or email telling me, or a direct mail piece telling me, hey, it's time for your service, appointment, or time for your maintenance. It's all done via the vehicle. And and I think certainly you guys being right in the middle of that technology space, and as the technology provider for the dealer, have a huge role in how that data gets moved and communicated, and what it looks like, and how the customer is communicated with. So to me, that's the holy grail of the customer experience. I mean, if you think about that, you can't, that creates such a wow experience for a customer.
Well, I'll take it a step further, Cliff. I'll say, what about for most of us? I can't go to the dealership in the middle of the day. Right?
No,
I got to drop my car off either before or after they're closed, right?
Yeah.
So then I can make that appointment. I can drop it off. There's a key locker there.
Yeah.
There's a key for the loader in the key locker. My keys go in. Later on that day, I get a text or it's on my dash or whatever it is, right? That says, hey, this is what we found. Do you approve? Yes or no? Approve. Work's done. I take the loaner back that night. They're already closed, right? Key locker. But so the dealership is still able to upsell, right, with pictures and videos, things like that. And the process is just so much smoother for everybody involved. It's not just the customer, right? It's the dealership employee too.
I think this generational AI or the large language models, really open the door and create some fascinating opportunities for the industry in terms of, we just saw Mercedes announce a couple of weeks ago that they are integrating a test or launched a beta test integrating Microsoft's ChatGPT with their telematics voice assistant program. Now, right now, it's a really cool parlor trick, right? Cool. I mean, your car's talking to you, and you talk about Knight Rider, KIT for those of us that are old enough to remember that. But if that proves successful on this level, then you start talking about how to integrate that generational AI or large language model with the actual mechanical systems of the vehicle, and then the vehicle, is able to tell you verbally, "Hey, I need new brakes." And then you tie it to the dealership, and to your point of, maybe I can't drop the car off during working hours. Well, instead of having a dealership employee text me something saying, hey, your car's going to be, your loaner is here, just drop off the keys in the box. Maybe it's the generational AI or the AI conversing with me, shooting me the text saying, hey, here are the instructions, boom, it's all
here's a QR code.
And I think, there's a lot of things that have to happen the manufacturer level with their data sets and data infrastructure. The dealers and manufacturers have to develop more of a collaborative approach. And I think the OEMs that find a way to truly convince their dealers that this is collaborative and we're not going to take your data and use it against you. And that's still a big battle.
It is.
But once, I think, for the manufacturers that are able to figure that out, I think, I think that the opportunities are endless on how they can weave that into their whole ownership customer experience.
Yeah, I agree. So, Cliff, I want to kind of shift gears a little bit.
Sure.
And talk about AUTOVATE. So you launched this conference. Is this going to be the sixth?
It's the sixth as branded as AUTOVATE.
Okay.
We had done one the year before. I mean, in 2016, that wasn't. So, I say it's really the seventh event.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll get into that. But you've also launched a few other pieces around AUTOVATE, right? So you have a newsletter that you've launched.
Right.
Just launched a podcast.
Right.
So talk about some of that stuff. It's new, so people may be interested in it.
Yeah. And look, we're still trying to find the rhythm.
Right.
And
that's the hardest part.
So I haven't marketed that as intensely. As I think some people would expect, but there's a method to the madness there. So the newsletter, it's right now twice a month, and frequency could end up going weekly.
So what's the format? Because some newsletters, right, there'll be little blurbs linking to an article. Some will be a long form.
Look, with the long form, it really comes from the Banks Report, stuff that I publish on the Banks Report. I mean, the newsletter that'll go out this week, I published a piece yesterday on the UAW negotiations that are starting this week. And it's a rather long piece. I probably wrote too much. But I think I wanted to provide a primer to our audience that maybe doesn't pay much attention to that world, and show how, what the background is, how it could play out, what the challenges, issues are today, but also how it could end up impacting dealers selling those the big three brands,
Right.
come September 14th when the contract runs out, and the chance, just in short, I really believe there's going to be a strike. It's going to be really hard to avoid that, but so that's that's the long form piece. I provide a running update on M&A deals on the tech side and on the dealership buy sell side. We'll have a mid-year report on the dealership buy sells. There'll be a subscriber based for the banks report behind a paywall, but and we'll do a mid-year report on the tech M&A. But I also it's not just the content's not just generated by me. I look for interesting stories from different publications, both industry and non-industry publications that I think provide interesting perspectives.
Yeah.
And link to those stories too. I don't look at myself as being a competitor to automotive news or auto remarketing or awards. I mean, I use their content often. I mean, because it's good stuff. But I think it's just a service that we're providing. I think the podcast also is going to be twice a week, but as we in the format is Nick Calderone, who is the co-host, asking me questions and teeing me up primarily for some of these stories to talk about. We keep it to 20 to 30 minutes max.
So it's pretty topical, though.
It's pretty topical.
Yeah.
It's topical, yeah. And but again, what I'm trying to do with AUTOVATE is build it out as an annual package instead of just an event.
Sure.
But high level sponsors that I think provide them with a 12-month, package that goes beyond just an event, but enables them to participate in the podcasts, newsletters, and whatnot. So I think it's maybe a different way of looking at it, but I have a long history, from Wards and obviously the Banks Report and the short stint I did with Digital Dealer for about 2 years running that.
So when you think about the conference itself, I mean, historically that's been pretty focused on M&A, right? Investors, M&A.
In trends, right?
Yeah. So what do you see in that world right now? Kind of what's anything exciting? Are we kind of in a summertime lull for now? What are you seeing?
Yeah, we are in somewhat of a lull. I mean, small deals are getting done. We had a period in, I think, November, December, maybe fourth quarter of last year where there were some big deals that were on the table. They did not get across the finish line. Yeah. They got pulled. The markets just weren't cooperating. It'll be interesting. We're starting to see some stirrings outside of automotive, just on the whole IPO side, the initial public offerings. A couple of these bigger names outside the industry, but just within the U.S. market, some of these IPOs launched successfully. Then we may see some loosening and might see some activity by the end of the year with some big names in our industry. I think there's a couple, maybe 3 or 4 possible big plays right now that could happen maybe right around the time of AUTOVATE. We'll see. And it's not that these companies have to. I mean, I think they're just trying to time the market correctly. Yeah. But some exciting. I think it'll be exciting as we get through, as we get deeper down. Without a recession, we haven't really had a recession. Companies and banks and the markets are getting more used to the higher interest rates. Yep. Hasn't killed anything. So I think as we'll start seeing some movement at some point. Now on the dealership side though, and I'll get back to AUTOVATE in a second, but the buy sells, I think June was pretty active. We had 16. These are the ones that have been announced. There were 16 transactions involving 39 rooftops, and that was primarily, Lithia picking up 14 stores from the Priority Group in Virginia, AutoNation bought the Bob Baker Group, 5 stores there. So ironically, Lithia bought those 14. They bought the Ford store outside of Georgia, or in Georgia, and then they sold 3 stores. So they were pretty active in that space. But July is off to somewhat of a slow start, but maybe that was July 4th. But we'll see what the second half of the year looks like.
Yeah. So when you see all that activity, and especially in the M&A space, what impact does that have on the retailers? Are there, and maybe it's historically, maybe it's looking forward to some of the ones that you were referencing. Is there a tangible impact that retailers see? Because a lot of times, you'll see an announcement, so-and-so bought so-and-so, right?
Yeah.
And then not much comes of it, right?
Right,
so,
right.
So I don't know, what are the benefits, or maybe not benefits, but just impact to retailers when these things happen, some of the more sizable ones?
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis,
right.
And I'll get specific. I mean, CDK, ADP Dealer Services in 2014 spun out.
Yep.
The Dealer Services Group became CDK, and immediately activist investors came in. That significantly impacted the dealers, their customers moving forward, because there were significant cuts made on customer service. I mean, and it was all being driven by activist investors who were looking to get their money out of their investment. So you have that. You have that. Sometimes an acquisition does provide the seller, the selling company. It does enable them with better capital, better better software, or a bigger platform, marketing platform to end up providing a better service. And many times these deals are done just because the buying company is trying to position itself for an exit for a sale, and so they are adding to their war chest, so to speak, and it enables them to be more creative with their numbers to get a better price. So some of it's not. Sometimes these deals aren't done to even think about integrating into the company. So the way I read the tea leaves, or the way I interpret some of these deals, is I look at the ownership structure, right? And if you have a long, stable company that doesn't really have any interest or showing any interest of exiting, or they don't have private equity ownership,
right,
then the acquisitions that they make typically are to really fill holes in their solution set, right? I think you guys play that role.
Yeah.
I come at it from that approach. It's not just M&A that we look at AUTOVATE. I really I wanted to. Well, I think one of the reasons I created even the Banks Report and then AUTOVATE was to help dealers, help people understand that whole investment side of the business, because I didn't feel it was being covered adequately in the industry by the various publications. There was a lot of misunderstanding, or people just not knowing about it. But automotive retail is such a laboratory, and the environment is just it's incredible, and I love it, because on the vendor side, it's founders, many of them from dealerships, many of them still within dealerships, that see something and go out and create a product and a solution and a company and end up living the American dream. Yeah. I mean, we've seen some big ones. I mean, you talked about Arcona. We saw, some that have sold their companies for hundreds of millions of dollars and started with an idea. And I think for dealers, there's a lot of opportunity to invest in some of these startups and companies. Yeah. And so I think AUTOVATE has become a place, I think, where those conversations, that education and perspective, I like to think we provide that. I think we provide an environment in which some of those conversations can start. Yeah. Where people are whiteboarding in their heads. I use that term, whiteboarding. But where you're sitting in the audience and you're listening to someone talk on stage. When I say talk, I mean it's a Q&A with me. Right. There really aren't any presentations, so it's not sales pitches, it's true conversations, but going, well, what if, well, we could provide that, we could do that. There have been quite a few transactions over the last few years where the conversation started at AUTOVATE.
Right.
So, it's I'm still growing it and managing it, and it's we have a great partner now with digital or DAS Technologies, which has look, I was that entrepreneur, and I was funding this thing out of my own pocket primarily. Right. I had a partner, but it was I think what we're seeing today with some of the things that we're doing is coming out of that relationship where I'm able to leverage some resources and take and execute on the vision that I've had for AUTOVATE and the banks report. So
that's great. That's great. Well, we love seeing it for sure. Cliff, I could talk to you for probably days at a time.
I know.
So, but I do want to be respectful of your time. Anything we haven't talked about today that we should before we jump out of here? Anything you want to touch base on?
Wow, boy, there's. I think we've covered the high bases. I mean, pay attention to the UAW negotiations, for sure.
Yeah.
As we move forward, and some of the inventory that we're starting to see pile up on some of these dealer lots, especially with Stellantis, and I think even with GM and Ford now is creeping up, is because they're looking at fortifying and and preparing for the eventuality of a strike. So they want to make sure their dealer lots are prepared.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
that's a good call. It will be an interesting fall for sure. So, Cliff, it's always a blast. I really appreciate you taking time.
Greg, thank you so much.
Yeah,
love it.
We'll talk again soon.
Great. Okay.
See ya. It is always fun to talk with the ever-entertaining and knowledgeable Cliff Banks. I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Before we hop off, don't forget you can watch or listen to all episodes of Connected on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify podcasts, and make sure to hit subscribe so you're notified every other week when new episodes are released. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.